Hey everybody, let's take 5 minutes out of our day and meditate on God's Word together. One of the most common ways Jesus was addressed was as teacher. His ministry was in part a teaching ministry. And one of the most common ways Jesus taught was by telling stories. In the Gospels, these are called parables. And Jesus used them frequently. In Mark chapter 4, verse 33, Mark tells us, with many such parables he spoke the word to them as they were able to hear it. He did not speak to them without a parable, but privately to his own disciples he explained everything. Parables were down-to-earth stories that everybody could understand. They weren't complicated. Sometimes they're just a sentence or two sentences long. They're quite short. Often parables are described as an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. That's not a bad description of the parables of Jesus. But just because they were simple in this way doesn't mean that they were superficial. In fact, in Mark 4:11, Jesus talks about the mystery of the kingdom of heaven that he is describing in parables. Now, it's not mysterious or as in esoteric or arcane, as if there's some interpretive key you need to read the parables. That once you know this special key, you'll be able to really understand what the parables are all about. That's not what this means, the mystery of the kingdom of heaven. Rather, what makes the parables of Jesus mysterious is that they reveal or make us see what's inside us. They challenge us. They make us confront our own values and our own lives. They make us examine how we treat people. They make us examine how we look at ourselves and really make us look in the mirror and make us see things that typically we don't want to see. They ask questions that we have often avoided. And so in this way, the parables of Jesus were quite provocative, even if they are, on one level, simple. And they're full of surprises and left turns. The good guys end up being the bad guys, and the bad guys end up being the good guys. Not what you'd expect. The most religious are the ones who are condemned sometimes, and the most hated end up being the most humble. We expect fairness in wages for a group of men who are working, and you end up seeing that some get paid more than others out of God's goodness. You expect the rebellious son to really get what's his, get what's coming to him, but it's the good son that gets taken out to the shed at the end of the story. The parables of Jesus are provocative, but they have to be contextualized to see this. What I mean is you have to read them in their context. It's often been said that a text without a context becomes a pretext for a proof text. And we don't want to have proof texts. They are told in a certain place in a certain time, and that time and place was not 21st century United States of America. It was first century Palestine, which was an agrarian, deeply religious, and very political, hotly political culture. And so there are all kinds of references in them. And we have to know things about that if we're going to hear them the way Jesus taught them. We have to know who Samaritans were and what their problems were with Jews and why Jews didn't like Samaritans. We have to know who the Pharisees were and how they thought of themselves and how others thought of them. We have to see how tax collectors were thought of. We have to know a little bit about ancient Near Eastern day laborers and ancient Near Eastern family dynamics so we can see what's going on in these parables. And if we don't understand that context, we may end up using or treating the parables for a proof text. We want to honor God's word and listen to it. But we can't just stop with knowing what the parables mean. We have to see and experience what they do. They remind us, they provoke us, they disturb us, they challenge us. They're not just stories for children. You might say that the parables of Jesus comfort the afflicted and afflict the comforted. If you listen to a parable and you aren't challenged in any way, you may not be reading it closely enough. They challenge us to examine our priorities. What's important to you? Is the kingdom of heaven something deeply important to you? Or is it something so valuable that you would sell everything you have to get that pearl of great price that is the kingdom of heaven? So in this next series of lessons, we're going to go through taking 5 minutes each time to summarize and see and experience what these parables do in our hearts. One good example is a good Samaritan. We'll talk about that next time we take 5. I'll see you then.